Here are three truths. The suburbs can be lonely. Intimacy isn't always sweet. And, as the writer Mary Cantwell once said, marriage, at least in the beginning, requires three people. The third provides the glue. Anthony and I lived in a suburb, the kind where everyone is friendly, but no one really seems to be a friend. We lived at one end of a cul-de-sac, and we were in year 6 of our marriage, so not in the beginning, but we needed glue. We decided we had to have an outlet, and we chose our neighbor Gary, but we didn't call him by his actual name. We called him Blocker. He parked his car on the sidewalk. Big deal. But minor drama is the lifeblood of the suburbs. He was an opportunity, so Anthony and I seized it. Anthony and I needed glue desperately that year. In James M. Honeycutt's research article, Differences in Imagined Associations, we can identify that sharing as a marital ideology can be observed as a helpful, calming technique, whereas negatively associated with an anxious, ambivalent attachment. Sometimes this attachment can be seen as a person. This New York Times editorial, Modern Love, examines the villains in our lives and how they're supposed to cause us ruin, although it's rarely discussed the antagonists that actually enrich your life. After all, the villains always help the heroes grow in the end. It Took a Villain to Save Our Marriage by Teresa Difalco. The petty details. Blocker had a 2-car garage and full driveway, but preferred to park his black SUV on the sidewalk. So anyone who wanted to walk on the sidewalk in front of his house had to go into the street to get by. I walked up and down that hill to the park every day, and one day I noticed a window was open. So I stepped off the sidewalk in front of his house and shouted, "Get off the sidewalk!" Blocker's response was prompt. He came to our house, banged on the door, so I opened it. He had ripped jeans and a t-shirt. And if not for the fact that he looked crazed as if he killed a man in Reno. Okay, he might have passed off as attractive. You have to let that one slide. He didn't bother with the pleasantries. "If you have a problem," he said, "deal with it to my face." We had already dealt with it to his face, but no matter. He grew aggressive fast, shouting expletives at us in broad daylight. He directed a special obscenity right at me. And Anthony gave it right back at him. This was the year that I felt trapped, like Rapunzel at the top of the hill, alone and invisible, until Anthony rode in, strong and fierce, to my defense. This occurred for a few more months until we put some open house signs out and bought a house in a new town. Not because of Blocker, but when Anthony and I had problems, we threw life change at it, our MO. So when these open house signs began to go missing, we naturally assumed that Blocker had been behind it. Okay. I actually harbored a secret thought that he didn't want us to go. But then one night, when Anthony went silently to bed, We were in the worst kind of fight. The kind where you walk away seething. I fumed and had a little too much wine. And while the rest of the block kissed goodnight, I stomped on down to Blocker's house and banged on his door. He opened it, shirtless and calm. Oh, this unnerved me. I'm sure I looked crazed, my face puffed up. Stop stealing our signs! There was a shift. It was he who had the advantage now. I was on his porch and drunk. But Blocker didn't seem angry, as he should have been that I had woken him at this time. We stood inches apart. There was a strange intimacy to our hatred. Look, he said, I didn't take your signs. Seriously, the city picks them up sometimes, and I know where they put them. I can show you if you want. I didn't want, but I thanked him and walked home, both comforted and shaken, knowing that Anthony would kill me if he knew I crossed enemy lines like that. I never told him. But in my mind, I give us a closure that I wish we could have achieved in real life. We're sitting on his porch, sharing a beer, making small talk. I say thank you, but it also means I'm sorry. He understands that. But in reality, Anthony and I moved without saying a word, and a year later, just last month, I got a call from an old friend, Julie. I have kind of weird news, she said, and paused. Pauses are never good. Gary's dead? He hung himself. uh, I couldn't breathe, and my heart seemed to stop. There was no way. Blocker wouldn't do that. He was Teflon. He was stronger than all of us. But he wasn't, though. And he was probably near his breaking point, and maybe it was even obvious. I had just been too caught up in our strange dance to see it. After all, I wasn't supposed to care about him. We were enemies. But then I remember the first time he showed up at our house, terrifying and angry, and shirtless. And I think that's all he could do. It was a violent, profane tirade against us, the world, as it turned out. And it broke my heart.